mean, I've always looked at failure as mandatory. I mean, first off, if you're not failing at things, you're not trying hard enough. You're not taking enough risk. I mean, that's where the learning period is. That's where the growth is. Bodybuilders call it working to failure. You know, when you work to failure, you increase, you know, your mass much quicker. You know, the goal in my world is actually to fail as much as possible, because I figure if I fail 10 times, you know, one of those 10 times I'm going to learn something really profound, and then I'm going to make a whole bunch of money from it, or it's going to make me super happy or whatever. But if I'm just sitting around, you know, telling myself how awesome I am all day, then it's pretty likely that I'm on a downward, you know, spiral of some sort. So I'm setting out to either do as many things as I can so that I will run into a failure, and sometimes I'm actually just, you know, I'm just trying to do hard things and fail and learn. So you can actually use failure to profit. You can use failure to, you know, create good content. The fact is, the next time you're stuck and you're all pissed off, like I get, take out your failure diary and write down what's bothering you. And when you find that solution, write it down there and put it out for other people. Or if you don't find that solution, come back to it when you're bored. That's my take on failure today. 1, it's the only way that you're ever going to actually learn anything. 2, it's the only way you're going to grow. 3, you can actually profit from it wildly by saving everybody else the hardship and the trouble. Which leads me to topic number 2 today, which is rejection. Okay? Rejection, people fear rejection almost more than anything else. There's an old saying that people would rather die than do public speaking. There was actually like a survey taken, and there was a huge percentage of people that would rather die than speak publicly on stage. Why? Because they were worried about being rejected. So I find that quite funny that somebody would actually rather be dead than public speak. But you know what? For a lot of people, it's a big issue because they're worried about this concept of rejection. Now, I want to talk about the word rejection for a second, because it's a word that people use a lot, but I think they actually have the definition wrong. Because here's the definition of rejection. Rejection is derived from the American Heritage Dictionary. It defines it as to refuse to accept, refuse to submit to, refuse to believe in, or make use of. Okay? Rejection's like a flat line. It's like a definitive. Okay? If you're in any type of sales profession, if you do any type of prospecting, sales, closing, persuasion, anything, okay? Rejection's like the definitive no. Okay? If you are rejected, the prospect that they're not buying from you ever. Okay? That's rejection. Okay? But I think that people misconstrue rejection for objection. Okay? Because rejection is definitive. Where objection, okay, here's the definition of objection. A reason or argument offered in disagreement, opposition, refusal, or disapproval. Okay? I'm going to just go through that definition again. Objection. Okay? An objection is a reason or argument offered in disagreement, opposition, refusal, or disapproval. Okay? If you're doing any type of sales, if you're doing any type of closing, persuasion, whatever, an objection is definite as well. It's a definite maybe. Okay? The prospect isn't ready to buy because you haven't covered their concerns or you haven't met some of their demands. Okay? And objections, and this is why you should always take surveys if you're doing any type of online marketing, or you should write down your objections if you're ever having a one-on-one conversation, because objections are actually where the sales process begins. There's a lot of people that feel like, there's 5% of people that you'll present to, whether it be online or offline, and they're what we call lay-down sales. Okay, lay-down sales is like, these people buy anything. Okay, these people will buy my hat off my head. You could tell them anything you want. Okay, that's 5%. They're lay down sales. You just say, give me the card, and they give you the card, and they don't even know what they're buying. Okay, and there's a lot, it happens all the time. But the rest of the people, they take a little bit more work. Some more work than others. But a lot of people believe that you don't even start the sales process until you receive the first objection, because the first objection means that that person is now communicating with you. And the objection allows you to find out why the person is not a lay down sale, why they're not convinced, and where you need to put your focus and where you need to do a better job of educating them or improving your product. Okay? It may be about educating them, it may be about improving your product, but either way, you need to know these things. So the objection is actually, especially the first one, is mandatory for you to move forward. So for those people that think rejection and objection are the same things, they're absolutely not. And for those people who have a fear around an objection, you deserve to change your slant on it, because a lot of the times, the first time you get an objection, that's the, aha, okay, now we're in a dialogue. Okay, now I can figure out, what's going on and where I'm off base. Okay, so a common example is, let's say I'm talking to somebody and I want to sell them a stock. Okay, the stock is Apple. Okay, and I'm trying to explain to them that Apple is this massive company and it's always going up and they're always creating great products, and the stock price is good right now and the markets are picking up and blah, 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 blah. And you should buy the stock. Okay? Now, an example objection would be, I just don't get it. So the prospect says, I just don't get it. That's not a rejection. It's an objection. To which your answer, and maybe this is just obvious to me, but I'm sure it's obvious to you as well, your answer would be something like, well, what specifically don't you get? Because there's really only 3 reasons why somebody's going to turn you down. These are 3 reasons that somebody has an objection to buying. 1, they don't understand the product. 2, they don't trust the company. 3, they don't trust you. Okay? So the moment that you can find out which one of those 3 things is the sticking point, then you can clarify that, or worst case scenario, you can make it better if you just find that people are focusing on that one thing over and over and over again, whether it be the product, the company, or you, and that 1, 2, or 3 things, they just suck. But at least it helps you define where the issue is, because sometimes people will trust you and like you, sometimes they'll trust and like the company, but they just don't understand the product. And if you're constantly focusing on how great the company is and how great you are and how great you are to work with, but you don't find out from the person that they just don't understand the product, they're never going to buy from you. I mean, occasionally you can beat them down with success stories and calls to action or whatever, but 9 times out of 10, if they don't understand the product, they're not going to buy from you. So the objection allows you the angle to figure out where their sticking point is, okay? Then you can help a perfectly good buyer understand what you're offering, okay? And at the end of your clarification on, let's say, the product, you ask them something like, now does that make more sense to you? And they say, yeah. Then you say, great. Are you ready to get started? And they say, no. Well, then you know it's not so much the product anymore. It's got to be number 2 or number 3, which is you or it's the company. So the objection is like the opening of the door, just like this much, so you can stick your eye in and see what's behind it, okay? And you accomplish that obviously through questions, and you never take it personally, and you never get aggressive about it, and you just ask them straight up, what specifically do you not get? What specifically are you not understanding at this point? Because I would love to help educate you a little bit more on the subject, okay? So, I was thinking about this over the last 2 days, these two concepts, these concepts of, people misunderstanding rejection and thinking that all objections are definitive, where rejection is definitive, but objections are actually the starting point. They're the thing that you can use in, as a weapon in your arsenal. And failure. And why so many people shy away from these two things, the fear of failure and the fear of rejection. And what I'm here to tell you is that it really doesn't matter what you're looking at in life. There's always the yin to the yang. There's always the opposite perspective that you can take. And that doesn't make me, by any means, superhuman. I'm not, impermeable to, getting frustrated. I'm not impermeable to having, sales conversations not go my way. Okay? Those things happen to everybody. Okay? But the reality is that if you turn them on their end and you actually look at them as an opportunity to not only make more sales, but also to learn, grow, or in the case of me talking earlier about my failure diary, there are ways to profit later. In fact, I had an idea about a week ago where I was like, why the hell can't I find this thing? And I researched because it seems so freaking obvious to me that somebody must have created a website for this by now. And they hadn't. So I called up a couple programmer friends of mine and I had them start building it. Because I was like, oh my God, there's going to be 1 million people a month searching for the answers to these things. So for me, embracing the action and embracing the failure will actually turn out to be an extremely profitable venture, I'm sure, because now I can turn it on its head and I can use it, because now I know I'm going to be able to help a lot of people solve the same anguish that I was. So, this isn't a bad idea. At the end of the day, you could probably start 2 diaries like this. You could start one called Failures, and write down your failures and write down your solutions that you found, or come back to them another time, find a solution and use it to profit from. And maybe another one could be Objections. Because if you continue to get the same objections, okay, if people continue to ask you things like, if you're in network marketing, for example, and people continue to ask you questions like, well, how much money have you made? Okay, that's an objection to you. That person doesn't trust you yet. They don't trust in your results, your leadership, your sales ability, your ability to support them, whatever the case may be. You only get questions like that when something's not right in your presentation. But if you're getting that question all the time and no one's saying to you, I don't get the product, or where is this company based? I've never heard of this company, blah, 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 blah. And you're constantly getting, how much money have you made? Or flip it around, you never get that, but somebody's always saying to you, I don't get the product, I don't understand the product, blah, blah, blah. And you write this down enough, success leaves clues. You're going to start to see patterns, and then you can say, you know what? I need to do a better job at cleaning up that area. And ultimately, as a result of writing it down, recognizing and working on it, you're going to make a ton more sales, you're going to be a ton more relaxed, you're going to be a ton more successful. So I could keep talking on and on, but sometimes you just have to know when to stop. And so I'm going to stop. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some questions for the next 10 minutes. So I want to say hi to Tony Rush. I want to say hi to Tony Blue, Nigel, Joseph Massey. Thanks all for joining the show. If you guys have questions tonight, or you have experiences, I guess, that you want to share, feel free to type them in. It ends up becoming a very, interactive community experience anyway. And tell me your thoughts or feelings on failure or rejection, and if you've used them, not used them, if you think that this will help, so on and so forth. What's the answer to how much you made? Okay, well, here's the thing. If you understood what I was saying, then the answer is not actually in creating an answer. You can create an answer. I've heard a ton of different answers, okay? One of my favorite answers is, I just got started, but it has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with you, It's going to depend on how much you put into it. It's going to depend on how much you believe in it. It's going to depend on how much effort you put in, how coachable and trainable you are, And I was very excited about the opportunity, and either you will be or you won't be, right? Or you can be a total aggressive prick and go the other way and say, you know, why does it matter how much I've made? This is about you. It's not about me. You can say a whole bunch of different things, but the point is that the response to the question is not the important thing. The question is the more important thing, which is, why are they asking you? Okay? If you're delivering a presentation with confidence, if you know the details of your product, if you know the details of your company, if you drive home the point that you're going to be there to support your buyer, it's very, very rare that they're ever going to ask you how much you've made, because you sound sharp as a tack, you know your shit, and you're confident in your presentation. And if you're not confident in your presentation, that's when people start to ask you that stuff. They shouldn't really be asking you that question to start with if you're confident in your delivery and your details are good and your excitement is good. But questions, if you're asking me about asking people questions, if you're doing any type of prospecting, then the number one key to prospecting is keeping rapport, okay? And how you keep rapport and how you make the sale is by figuring out what that person wants, what's their motivation, what's driving them, why are they looking, and you do that by asking questions, but you keep rapport by actually listening to them and actually giving them verbal clues that you're listening to them. And so what I mean by verbal clues is if someone's like, talking away about, their church and how they want to make their church a bunch of money, then you got to be involved in the conversation. You got to be listening for the details, and you got to be, okay, yeah, I understand. Yeah, that's keeping rapport. That's keeping the conversation, intact. Now, obviously, you don't let people go off on these, huge rants, and sometimes that's difficult to do because, people like to talk. But, if someone's going off on a huge rant, and then you have to know the point where you say, okay, I think that's great. I totally understand, what you're talking about here, but let's get back to, XYZ, whatever XYZ is. So you have to make sure that you're controlling the conversation by asking questions and keeping rapport and slowly taking person in the direction of where you want to go. What is a 30-second commercial for an elevator to get their attention and hand them a DVD? Okay. If you're handing DVDs out in any type of sales process, I'll give you a great example of somebody who prospected my wife the other day, and I thought it was quite brilliant. Okay, so my wife was getting our oil changed, and she was in one of those ones that you pull in and they just go underneath and zip, 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 and it's done in 15 minutes or whatever. And this guy kind of stuck his head in the window, and she was like, the guy was like, "Hey, how you doing?" And my wife was kind of like, well, she thought that he was going to start hitting on her or something. And he was like, he approached her like this. He said, "You seem like a very fashionable woman. Can I ask you a question?" And she was like, "Wow." And he was like, "Would you take my card and check out my website? Because I just started a new website on women's fashions, and I'd really appreciate your feedback. And if you think it's good, maybe tell some of your other women friends." So what he did was he complimented her, disarmed her, didn't try to sell her, asked her for her feedback. Everybody likes to give their feedback because, we're all egomaniacs and we want people to value our feedback. Asked her for her feedback and then said, and if you like it, he asked a favor. And people always want to help too. That's also in people's nature. So, if you were handing somebody a DVD and it was something with regards to, say, starting a business, you could take exactly the same pitch, which is very simple and very easy, and be like, "Hey, you know what? You dress nice. You look like a sharp person. I've got this DVD, and it's about starting, your own home business or starting your own business from home, or it's about how to make more money. I'd really love your feedback. Would you mind watching it and letting me know what you think? Or if you do like it, showing it to some of your friends." you're not coming across aggressive. You're not coming across over the top. You're complimenting, you're disarming, you're asking for a favor. And the worst thing that's going to happen is you're either going to get an objection or you're going to get a rejection, which at the end of the day doesn't matter. You don't even know the person. So that's certainly a simple way to approach what I would call a cold prospect and not come across like you're trying to skeeze them out. So I want to make sure I've got my questions. Oh, there's a whole bunch more now. Failure to create a necessity, that is what you are finding out a weakness in the has it first one of the questions. You gotta go down a limb, make something. Okay, doesn't seem like you guys have a lot of questions tonight. You know, there's like 150 of you on here or something like that. If you have any other questions, great. If you have any other feedback other than all the compliments, I appreciate the compliments. You know, they're fantastic. But if you have any other feedback or questions for me tonight, that'd be great. If you don't, I'm gonna put a bow on it and let you guys get back to your family, and I'm gonna go build some more blocks with my kid. So anything else that anybody has for me tonight? Hey, Brian. When you try a sales technique, what's the best way to remain authentic? Well, first off, I guess you shouldn't really try to use a sales technique. I mean, for me, my approach, there are ways that you can almost always manipulate somebody to make a sale. You can get them to the point where they will either hang up or they will buy from you. Okay? And those would be your typical sales techniques. And I know some fairly ruthless ones. But the reality is that, one, you should never sell something that you don't 100% believe in yourself, because then you can't be authentic. Okay? And if you do believe in it 100%, then your energy is going to be on a different level and you're going to be inspired by it. And really, you don't have to be perfect in any sales technique, because your energy alone, which is about 90% of your communication, is going to come across to your prospect. And if they're a buyer, if they're the right fit, they're going to get started. If they're not the right fit, it wouldn't have really mattered what you were going to say anyway. And for me, when I go into any type of sales process, my sole goal is to ask enough questions to find out if what I'm offering would be value to that person. And if it's not, I don't want to sell it to them. And I want to get out of the situation as quickly as possible. But I'm never going to know that unless I ask them the right questions, or enough of the right questions, and I make sure that I clarify exactly what they want, exactly what we have, and see if there's a right fit. So for me, that's the only way that anybody can really stay authentic, is one, believe in what you sell, and two, be as excited as hell, you know, be sharp as a tack, know your shit, and ask lots of questions. And I could give you scripts and sales techniques and tactics, but at the end of the day, that's really all it comes down to, are those 5 things. If you do those 5 things, you're going to not only sell more stuff than most people, but you're going to do it in a way that makes people happy. A lot of people forget that sales, when it's done right, is not something you're doing to somebody. Okay? You're not doing or you know, applying a tactic. If you're doing sales properly, you're doing investigation and you're doing research to find the right person that your product could bring great value and happiness to. So you're providing a service. And if it's done right, you'll never be rejected.